All right, we've got our afterlife panel coming on now. Let me talk to you a little bit about Elizabeth before she moderates this panel that we have today. So thank you for being here today with us. Elizabeth is the president and co-founder and newsletter editor of Helping Parents Heal. She has 4 beautiful children, 2 of whom are in spirit. Chelsea passed when she was 2 days old in France, and Morgan transitioned at the base camp of Mount Everest when he was just 20 years old. Elizabeth is the affiliate leader of the Phoenix Scottsdale group of Helping Parents Heal, and she is the author of Life to Afterlife, Helping Parents Heal, the book. She is also a certified yoga instructor and teaches healing yoga. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's so great to see both of you, and it's wonderful to have these incredible members of our panel today. And we're going to just jump right in because we have some wonderful questions. We're going by alphabetical order. So I'm going to start with Mark Anthony, who is going to be at our conference. Mark Anthony, JD, psychic explorer, psychic lawyer, is a world-renowned psychic medium, Oxford-educated attorney, near-death experience researcher, paranormal expert, and legal analyst who appears internationally on TV and radio and headlines at conferences and expos like Helping Parents Heal. Mark is a featured columnist for Best Holistic Life magazine and co-host of The Psychic and the Doc on the Transformation Network. Mark Anthony is the author of 3 best-selling books, The Afterlife Frequency, Evidence of Eternity, and Never Letting Go. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, has been endorsed by the world's top survival of consciousness scientists and designated by prettyprogressive.com as one of the top books about faith in God. The Afterlife Frequency and Evidence of Eternity were considered for Pulitzer Prizes. All of his books are recommended by hospices and grief counselors worldwide. So I am going to address the first question to Mark Anthony. And that question is, through your work as a medium and near-death experiencer, or excuse me, near-death experience researcher,
and
you have developed, well, yes, and experiencer, I know that you are as well. You have developed new terms and concepts about spirit communication. One of these is electromagnetic soul. Can you explain what this means to us?
I can, and I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. We know that in the study of afterlife science, we are now discovering that the brain did not create consciousness, it merely hosts it, the way your computer hard drive host the programs on it. I mean, nobody's hard drive created Windows 10 or Windows, any of the Windows programs. So we know from the study of neuroscience that the brain, being only 2% of the body's weight, uses over 20% of its electrical energy. We know from the laws of thermodynamics and physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. And we know from faith that every great spiritual teacher, from the sages of ancient India 5,000 years ago, through Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Native American spirituality, all believe that the soul, the who and what we are, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and moves on after the body dies. So I created the term electromagnetic soul to explain what we really are, which is pure consciousness that is eternal electromagnetic energy. Now, obviously, I'm giving the Cliff Notes version of this, but I would like to honor something that Dr. Gary Schwartz said about the electromagnetic soul, because sometimes people say that, well, this sounds all very much like physics. And Dr. Schwartz said, well, let's look at electromagnetic soul as soul, S-O-U-L, standing for source of universal love.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for that answer. And I'm glad that you were able to add something for Gary because he has very weak internet service right now, but we're going to jump from you and come back to you. to Dr. Lenore Matthew, who holds a PhD and Master's in Social Work from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, with expertise in trauma, grief, and intuitive awakenings, as well as research and evidence-based practice. She is also a trained evidential medium and a young widow. Her ability of mediumship opened up when her late husband unexpectedly passed in 2020. Today, Dr. Matthew blends her social work and research background with her mediumship ability to help people hone their own intuitive abilities and develop interactive, healing relationships with their loved ones in the afterlife. You can find out more about her and her work at www.drlenorematthew.com. And I'm going to go ahead and ask her first question. From your research, practice, and personal experience, how can maintaining an active relationship with a loved one in the afterlife help someone heal through a loss? And that is something that we all want to know. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for inviting me to this panel. Thank you to the panelists and especially to Open to Hope and everyone who's here. So many of us have experienced something like receiving signs or afterlife communications from our loved ones. It's a common experience. I would say it's actually a majority of us who've lost a loved one on the other side have felt our loved one with us. We've dreamt of them. We've received some sort of a sign, something poignant. There was a 2023 survey by the Pew Research Center that went out over a representative survey of the population of the United States. And over half of all Americans have felt their loved one near them after they pass. So this is a very common experience. The thing that I found in my own experience, especially being, a very left brain person or presenting myself as such before my husband passed in 2020, is we don't have any sort of concept of, it's not in our realm of day-to-day conversation. If it is, it's in a very Hollywoodized or sensationalized way. But when we're faced with an extreme traumatic loss or any kind of loss, it's almost like the ego crumbles, and whatever comes in that brings some sort of light, it's almost like bring it on. At least that's how I felt. So I found in my research, in my practice, and also in my own lived experience, when we connect to our loved ones on the other side, and I mean that by receiving their signs, but also by actively engaging with them. So for me, I meet my husband all the time in meditation, also seeing mediums. I practice as a medium as well. There's this short-term and long-term effect of positive impact on our healing and also on our mental health. And this really affects us kind of at three levels. We make sense of the present, we make sense of the past, and we make sense of the future, or we engage in these things in different ways by working with our loved ones. So in the present, right now, when we're going through loss, for me, it was in 2020. It still feels like yesterday. My husband died by suicide without any warning signs. So the trauma and the shock of that was just overwhelming. My entire worldview was uprooted. But the present of feeling him come close, of working with him in meditation, of connecting to him through mediumship, helped me feel hope and comfort in the immediate. It was a protective factor. I knew that, I have goosebumps all over as I say that. I know when he's here, I can feel him. I would meet him in dreams sometimes, but it was more the active connection through meditation. So in the present, there was a protective factor, a connection, and also an opening of my mind to something I've never thought of before, that he could be here, that maybe we continue. For the first time in my life, I thought about what it's like to have life after death. I'd never thought about it before. As I continued working with my husband, his name's Bruno, as I continued working with Bruno and meeting with him in meditation, doing guided meditations, feeling him in Shavasana after yoga, I started to get very clear signs that helped me reconcile the past. And so I started to understand by the clairsentient messages he would send, and sometimes objective information that I could verify, that helped me get my why. I understood, I started to piece together what happened in the past. And I've heard this in my research as well. For example, I think of one study participant who was estranged from her dad. He crossed and then he came to her, and they've actually been able to rebuild a relationship that they didn't have in the physical. They reconciled the past. And then we receive insight into the future, which, as someone who's gone through traumatic loss, it's like your whole world crumbles. and we've got to piece it back together somehow. And that happens gently at the mind, at the body, at the heart, at the soul, at the community, at the family. And where do you start? And for me, it was leaning into Bruno's messages and then messages from other people on the other side that I started to connect with. I started to learn guides. I started to meet my grandparents in new ways who are on the other side. And they give us pieces of information that help us move forward. And that ultimately led me back to the work that I do now, which is group work. I don't do one-on-one readings anymore, but I do group work of teaching people how to bring in this continued bond theory and apply it in a way where we learn how to tap into our own mediumship. So long story short, there are short-term and long-term benefits that help us move through grief, process it, and also find a life that we really deem worth living and love to live.
That's beautiful. You have such a way with words, and I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. We're moving on to Dr. Mark Pitstick, who is a huge part of Helping Parents Heal as well. He's an MADC, has 50 years of experience helping many people in hospitals, pastoral counseling settings, mental health centers, and holistic health care clinics. When he was 6 years old, Mark told his parents that a beautiful sunset reminds me of God, which I think is beautiful. Dr. Pitstick has written 7 books, created 11 transformative audio programs, produced a documentary, and hosted 2 radio shows on spiritual awareness and optimal living. He directs the Soul Phone Foundation. He assists in research on the Soul Phone Project and works closely with Helping Parents Heal as well. To learn more, you can go to either www.soulproof.com or www.thesoulphone.com. And your first question, Mark, is, what is the collective evidence that now proves life continues after bodily death? I think this might be one of my favorite questions for this panel. Could you tell us that?
You bet. Thanks very much, Elizabeth, for this opportunity to share some of the great news that provides a vast amount of hope and healing, much more than most people know about right now. I'll be referring to some articles on my website, soulproof.com. And so to learn more about the great news, what it is, how it can transform every aspect of your life, see article number 19. So the collective evidence, and that's Dr. Gary Schwartz and I, have broken down into 3 categories. First, scientific evidence. So this is true scientific evidence, controlled studies, replicated research, multi-centered studies, double-blind involvement, and published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. And to learn more about that scientific evidence, you can see article number 1 at soulproof.com. The second category of evidence we term clinical. And so that involves medical or psychological clinicians collecting data in a systematic way and analyzing. And the data collection occurs in professional offices, hospitals, or field settings. And the categories under clinical include near-death experiences, past life memories, perinatal research, life between life studies, terminal lucidity, and deathbed visions. So to learn more about that category of afterlife evidence, see article number 60. And finally, the third category we term experiential evidence, also known as empirical or firsthand experience evidence. And this is evidence that's perceived and analyzed by the person having the direct experience. And categories in that include after-death communications, out-of-body experiences, shared death experiences, although shared death experiences is now moving into the clinical realm with more research being collected, and other personal experiences. And these are described in article number 115. Now, my short book called The Afterlife Evidence describes all this evidence, and also Greater Reality Living, which Dr. Schwartz and I wrote together, available at soulproof.com and Amazon. And by the way, our policy is that anyone who can truly not afford these but wants them will send free digital copies. Just email me, mark@soulproof.com.
That is wonderful. And I know that this is true because we have lots of parents who get your books. We have right now about 9 minutes to be able to do 3 more questions. So we're going to whip through them if possible, starting with Mark Anthony again. And I love this question as well. What is a shared death experience and a deathbed vision? How does your EMS, which is the electromagnetic soul theory, explain these phenomena?
Thank you, Elizabeth. In my work as a psychic medium, and I've done over 15,000 readings, and I continue to do readings both in an individual and a group setting. And I've been able to observe close hand people that experience a deathbed vision as well as a shared death experience. When the electromagnetic soul is leaving the body, there is an expansion of frequency. And what happens is when somebody is in transition, we hear through near-death experience research how people go through a tunnel into the light and they're greeted by loved ones in spirit. Well, I've been at the bedside of a number of people as they're dying, and I'll pick up on the spirits that are there to greet them. So what happens is many times when somebody is dying, and it could be family members, friends, but also healthcare workers and hospice workers, they will observe that the person who's dying will start interacting with and talking to people that they know who died. They may start talking to a spouse or a child or a grandparent or friends who've died. And for years, people were saying, oh, well, this is the side effect of a dying brain. This is some type of a hallucination prior to passing. But now we have shared death experiences where those same people who are in close physical proximity, they too will see the spirits. I was at the bedside of one woman who was passing, and I picked up on 27 different spirits. Her children were able to identify 24 of them. The other 3, they weren't sure because it appeared to be on the great-grandparent level. And so what happens is, as the EMS is leaving the body, its frequency begins to interact with the afterlife frequency of the other side. Okay, so those are the spirits. But the rest of us in close proximity, and you don't have to be a medium to experience this, we all have electromagnetic souls. Our brains all operate on electromagnetic energy. And what happens in a shared death experience is your brainwave frequency starts to overlap with the person's who is transitioning and the spirits they're communicating with. And see, this has been documented for centuries, and people haven't, they haven't wanted to talk about it because it's kind of that fringe voodoo type of thing. But now that this is becoming more mainstream, it's been documented quite a bit. And I'd like to leave with perhaps one of the most famous deathbed visions happened 2 years ago. Our favorite Golden Girl, Betty White, as she was dying, she was married to the love of her life, Alan Ludden, for over, for decades, and he died 40 years before her. And at the precise moment when she died, she looked up and she said, Alan, and then she passed. So I'll leave us with that.
That's beautiful. Kind of like the one that Steve Jobs did as well, which was also beautiful. So we have 2.5 minutes each for the 2 of you. And thank you, Mark. So we're going to quick jump into Dr. Lenora Matthews' question, which is it possible for anyone to develop a relationship with their departed loved one? If so, how?
Yes, 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 yes. 1,000 times yes. I like it learning. I say learning spirit talk, learning how to tap into the other side through your own psychic abilities. I say it's like learning another language. And while there are people that, yes, may have a natural kind of ability to go deeper, we're all born with the capacity to learn how to say, hello, I love you in another language. So how do we do this? We can work with ourselves and then with groups, and both have their own merits and both are important. So when I say ourselves, both are connecting. It's this trifecta, right? Up to spirit. So on my own, I do guided meditations every day in the first year, especially after Bruno passed. I would do a guided meditation and I would just go elsewhere. And it helped my physical body heal. And it also helped take me to a place where we could connect. Energy healing like Reiki, Kundalini, movement, and then the settle after. So yoga helps. automatic writing and journaling. These are different ways that we can start to identify and connect in and start to get a sense of how our loved ones are coming close. And then for me and a lot of people with whom I've worked, my awareness and trust in my abilities really were just kind of blown out of the water when I started doing formal intuitive development. And there's no one here saying if you do so that you have to have the objective in mind of being a practicing medium. Maybe that's a part of your path for some of it. Maybe it's just a stepping stone. But as we start to work with other people, we expand our abilities and our gifts. And we also start to get validation that what we're perceiving is validated because other people are saying, yeah, you're right. That makes a lot of sense to me. So working with the self and then working with groups, all with the intention of calling our loved ones in.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And so the last question for Mark, but you might want to integrate something with Gary as well. How can people better sense the living presence of their loved ones who have changed worlds? So this is kind of similar to what Dr. Lenore Matthews was saying, but maybe you could expand on that.
Sure. I'll mention 3 ways. There are others. First of all, spontaneous after-death communications. And by the way, working with parents and with helping parents heal, almost 100% of those parents have had one or more waking or dreaming meaningful perceptions of their child. Secondly, I created the facilitated after-death communication technique as described in article number 9 at soulproof.com, which uses very deep relaxation / light hypnosis, guided imagery to quiet the brain, which you understand blocks out 99% of reality, and allows us then to sense what's all around us, really, our loved ones who have changed worlds. And in the future, we quite likely will be able to, and this is what Dr. Gary Schwartz is going to present, use soul phone technology. Dr. Schwartz is a former Harvard and Yale professor, now senior professor at the University of Arizona. So to learn more about that project, you can visit soulphone.com. But just briefly, he has been working for 15 years. We now have a team of software developers, electrical engineers, working on the soul switch, a binary yes/no signal from what we call post-material persons. Once this switch is perfected, then it will be able to be used in the soul keyboard, which is just a series of switches so that loved ones can text or type with us, and then eventually soul audio, talking, soul video, just like we're doing now. Very exciting.
With our loved ones instead. Yes.
This provides so much hope and healing for people. So I hope you know it's happening now. Please, this is part of that great news.
I've learned that it helped me to help others, to know I'm not the only one, put one foot in front of the other, find a life.
Adding hope to the darkness, you start on the trip to recovery.
Reach deep down inside and say, I am going to live on.
We laugh, we cry, and remember.
Hope without action doesn't work. Hope with action can change the world.
We always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours.